A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. If you need a website or a domain, go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase.
Hello everybody, how's it going? Hope you're all well. And please pardon the weird place to sit to start a video. I'm hiding from the wind, or hiding the microphone from the wind, which is coming from that direction and is very powerful, as I'm sure you'll see or hear before long. Anyway, this video, broadly speaking, is all about composition, and it actually begins a couple of weeks ago, about half a mile that way. Basically, the reason I'm recording this is that when I was recording that, I forgot to mention something I told myself I would mention at the start of the next video I made about composition, which is that about 6 weeks ago, I was over the other side of the Llanddwyn Peninsula in a place called Harloch doing some scouting, and I came across a homey type shop that was selling various trinkets and nice homely things. And on the front door of that shop, they had a quote by William Morris, which I'll have to look up because I'll butcher it if I don't. Here we go. Have nothing in your house that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful. Bit of a double negative in there. That's more complicated than it needs to be. But it's a quote I love because I think it could equally apply to photography as it can trinkets for your house. You know, if everything in your photo has utility or beauty, or ideally both, and everything that doesn't have one of those two things is gone, then in theory at least, I think you stand a good chance of eliminating distraction and making your photographs more impactful. Which is what I wanted to say at the start of this composition video, but I forgot. So I thought I'd say it now, and then you'll find out the other reason that I'm back here 2 weeks later in a minute. But for now, let's go to 2 weeks ago, and then we'll come back to now. I find it staggering that there are people that watch my channel. Maybe there won't be today. So, if you've been here before to Llanddwyn Island, you'll know that I'm not exactly reinventing the wheel here as far as what I'm shooting is concerned. My hope is that by sharing how I'm shooting these things, that's of interest to you. So fingers crossed. But as far as this 15th century church goes, and I think it's 15th century, I might need to do a bit more research on that, but there are a few things to consider when shooting it. A, the direction that you shoot it from, and in this light, it's just an absolute no-brainer to shoot it from here, because the front of the church, as we see it, is not in light, but if you look through the first window to get to the second window, you'll see that that wall is in light, and yet the frame of the second window isn't in the light because it's the same direction as the front of the church, or what we see as the front of the church. And that, I think, makes for an interesting dynamic. So this is clearly roughly the place to stand, and then it's a case of focal length and determining how wide you want to go. Do you want to include, for example, the lighthouse and the cross in the background? And I'm going to get rid of my rule that I've implemented recently of not chimping to look at the photos I just took, because there were some hikers coming through, and by including them, very obviously I have to include the lighthouse and the cross because they were to the right of the lighthouse and the cross as I looked at them. Ordinarily, or not ordinarily, but a lot of the time, there is another decision to make from here, which is how much of the mountains in the background on the Llanddwyn Peninsula do you want to include as well. Not a decision to be made today though, because there is cloud cover over those mountains. But if I was deciding how much of those mountains to include, I might decide to head a bit further back that way, shoot at a longer focal length to kind of compress the scene and make the mountains look a bit closer to this church. But again, not a decision that I have to make today because you can't see them. So yeah, that's a few things I'm thinking about when shooting here at this beautiful 15th century church. This is really one of my favourite places in the world to shoot. I think it's pretty much perfect. And I came down here a couple of weeks back, but by the time I got down here, all the light had gone. I thought we can do better than this for one of my favourite places in the world to shoot. So I'll come back again when the tide is high, and hopefully the sun is out then. Clouds come over, but I think we should be okay in a minute because the horizon looks clear. Famous last words. That's better. Now we're talking. So, top tip for coming here to this island generally is try and come not too far from high tide, or a couple of hours before high tide, if at all possible, because the island can be cut off by high tide, which means that if you get across before it's cut off, then you'll have it broadly to yourself, or to just anyone else who is willing to spend kind of 4 hours here, which isn't that many people actually, other than maybe some other photographers. The downside of that is that you have less subjects to work with. And here in particular, one of my favourite shots, particularly in winter, is to get walkers going across this seawall backlit with the sun behind them. That's a really nice shot. Not so much today, because the sun is too far north. Other things to think about here are the relationship between the lighthouse and the Llyn Peninsula Mountains, which we can see today in the background, and the island itself and the relationship between that and the mountains. You don't want to end up, for instance, at a height here that means that the island kind of gets in the way of the mountains behind, or maybe they just about touch on the horizon. That's never a good look. I always think you either want them separated or very purposefully overlapping. But somewhere in the middle, I kind of just think often causes confusion in your mind when you're looking at the photos. Another favourite photo I've taken here actually a few weeks back was down there on that beach, which hasn't got long before that's covered by the tide. But that was kind of midday summer light, not winter light. And for whatever reason, the light that it was just incredible. The atmosphere and the light was amazing. But yes, today I'm hoping to get something different from those perspectives and talk you through it, as well as some other stuff on the island as well. I was also hoping for a few more whitecaps out to sea, but the wind, even though it's strong, is straight westerly. So the waves are kind of just getting pushed over rather than pushed up if it was an easterly wind. But you can't have it all. I think the tide is also a bit high now. The sea seems to have calmed down a bit. Hopefully as it goes back out towards sunset, maybe the sea will pick back up. Who knows? I've spoken before on this channel about how I find, for me at least, that beauty is not always in and of itself that interesting. And often when I shoot in places this beautiful, I find I get back and look at the photos and I think, well, that is a beautiful spot, but I'm not massively interested in it. So I'm not going to return to these photos much because I don't find them interesting, even if they are sort of nice and pretty to look at. But I think that fence down there that's fallen down in front of the boathouse window, and I say fallen down, it might have been pushed down, we don't know what's happened to it, so it adds to the intrigue. That's the sort of thing that you can add to a scene like this to, I don't know, make it look like something more than a postcard, I think. And all of a sudden I have questions about at least part of the scene, and I think that adds to the beauty. Sun is still a touch high in the sky for this shot, I think. It wouldn't be if it was winter, not because the sun would be lower. I mean, if the sun was this high in the sky in winter, it would be fine because it would be over there and you'd have a bit more side light. But the sun's on my back at the moment and I want it to drop a few more degrees before I think this shot will work at its best. And also, as much as it's nice to see the mountains today, I was hoping for a bit more haze. I thought the ocean would be kicking up a lot more atmosphere than it is. There's a bit too much detail in those mountains for my liking. They're a bit distracting. I want the outline of them, have that removed, but I don't want the detail in them. We'll wait to see what the next couple of hours brings. This is far from the first time I've stood up here trying to work out what to do with this scene, with the cross, the lighthouse, and anything else that happens to be in the frame on that given day. And today it's quite a lot of stuff. As I said, you can see the mountains, there's some waves crashing into the rocks down here, but also you've got a bench, the shadow of the bench, some weird stick thing next to the cross. And all of that kind of makes things a bit messy. So I'm trying to work out what to do. And I don't know that I have an answer, really. Stick with it a bit longer, I think. Not my usual style getting this low. Typically I like to shoot at my head height because that's how I experience the world, and I want people to see my photos in a way that makes them think, oh, I could have just walked into that scene. Which is not typically the case when you're down low, but this scene I think very much calls for it. It's a bit messy over there, so you're better off getting low, having the grasses in the foreground, and getting rid of the mess by doing so. Well, we've just about lost the light on these grasses, but yeah, softer light, as it has been for the last 10 minutes, definitely works better than the light that we had before. Less contrast. I mean, that's not an uncommon thing, is it? But you also have the added benefit, certainly this time of year, of light falling in places that I want it to for this particular scene. So there's no light on the beach now. That kind of cleans the scene up a little bit, makes it less distracting. But I don't think in the last 10 minutes we've had the colours that I would want this scene to have. There's too much cloud cover and the wind is whipping up the sea as well. Both of those things make the sea a bit darker than I want it to be, and I suppose I could play with the luminance in post. Maybe that's what I'll do. But I think what I would prefer for a scene like this is a very calm day, and I'd want to shoot it at blue hour with no cloud cover. Very, very simple scene. I've shot in conditions like that actually before sunrise in years gone by, 2 or 3 years ago. And I think this exact frame would work brilliantly in those conditions as well. So maybe I'll come for sunrise one morning, but a high tide I think works brilliantly to kind of clean the beach up as well. High tide, 0 wind, 0 cloud cover at dawn or at sunset. Blue hour, either way. That's a lot of things to wish for. All before that fence gets fixed. We'll see who wins that race, but I'm excited. The best thing about photography, isn't it? The hope. I've changed my mind. I actually prefer the afternoon version, precisely because there is a bit more contrast, and therefore the boathouse and the window is darker, which I think adds to the mystery of the window and the fence. I mean, as I said, neither of those sets of conditions that I shot that scene in on that day are what I would want for the final photo. And actually that probably goes for all the photos that I've shown you today. I don't actually think I've shown you any photos that I would consider good, but hopefully that doesn't matter because this video has just been about composition. It's a bit of a double-edged sword living relatively close to somewhere that you consider to be a perfect photography location, as I do for Llanddwyn Island. I mean, it's more good than bad. Obviously, I can go and shoot there lots. But I do find that because I hold that location in such high regard, only perfect conditions will do for attempting to shoot it, because nothing else will do it justice. And I certainly feel that to date, I've not done that location justice, despite the fact that, as I say, I think it's basically a perfect photography location. And I remember the last time I went and filmed a video there back in February of this year, I think. I remember apologising for the fact that I was back because I've already made several videos there. And afterwards I remember thinking, what a ridiculous thing to do. I hope to shoot here forever. So why would I not celebrate that? I suppose I just think that people might get bored of it, but I certainly won't get bored of it, so I shouldn't apologise for being there. Utility. I was going to talk briefly about utility because I started the video by talking about utility and beauty in our photos. And I don't think beauty really needs defining. We all know what beauty is to us. But utility, I think, does warrant a quick conversation about. And this photo that I showed briefly earlier in the video, I shot this in the French Alps earlier this year. And you can see the cable car machinery. Really quite a hostile looking scene, mostly because of all the snow being whipped up by the biting wind that day. And when I think of utility in photography, I think of things like the brush in the bottom right hand corner of this photo, because what that brush says to me, despite the fact that it takes up 1% of the pixels of the photo, is that at some point a human has attempted to organise that chaos. In other words, it tells me an awful lot about the scene, despite the fact that it hardly takes up any real estate in the scene. Similar story with this sheet
on the left of this boat. This looks like quite an ethereal scene with this light and the mist, I think. The reality of this location is that it's not ethereal in any way, in any other conditions. This is like a derelict boatyard with what is, by most measures, a pretty ugly power station behind it. And I could have easily cloned out this sheet, obviously, and I thought about it, but by keeping it in the scene, I think you hint at the reality of the location. In other words, again, this sheet doesn't take up any real estate in the photo really, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of explaining what it is people are looking at. And I like that. So yes, utility and beauty. Hopefully that makes sense. Also, talking of the French Alps, the print from the French Alps, the restaurant I've called it, that has 1 week left at half price. So if you're interested in snapping up that print, please do it soon. After this week, it will then go back up to full price and I'll select another that will then become half price for a month. So thank you for your support with those, and thank you also to Squarespace for their continued support of this channel. Squarespace is what I use for my online store to sell prints and books and presets. My Squarespace website also houses my portfolio. It's where I publicize workshops, it's where I send newsletters from. And really for me, it started out just as a website, but now it's kind of like the nucleus of my business, essentially. And not every photographer wants an online store, a blog, newsletter functionality, I know that. But I do think having somewhere online to post your work that you control entirely without having to know a single line of code, I do think that's priceless and well worth your consideration. So if you'd like to try out Squarespace and build a portfolio of your own, you can do so for free with a free trial by going to squarespace.com. And after that, if you'd like to make a purchase, just go to squarespace.com/James and you'll get 10% off that first purchase. So a big thank you to them for their continued support, and a big thank you to you for your continued support. Anyway, I shall be back there soon, maybe not in the next video, but soon in Blue Hour. Windless day, high tide, cloudless. We'll see. See you then.